The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at dawn, but Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire arrived to find the massive chamber eerily quiet. The usual buzzing of 1,000 different species discussing trade routes, territorial disputes, and diplomatic protocols was replaced by whispered conversations and nervous clicking of mandibles. Commander Velish, the tall, blue-skinned Atlantean who served as the Council's military advisor, approached Zethkar with obvious concern etched across her crystalline features. Her normally steady voice carried an unusual tremor as she spoke. "Ambassador, have you had any communication with the human territories in the past 72 hours? Zethkar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among his species. The humans had been reliable trading partners for nearly 2 centuries, ever since they had emerged from their small corner of the galaxy with their peculiar mix of curiosity, stubbornness, and surprising technological adaptability. "Not since the quarterly trade review," Zethkar replied, his translator device converting his chittering language into standard galactic. "Why do you ask? Have they missed a scheduled diplomatic meeting?" Velish gestured toward the central display, where a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy slowly rotated. Thousands of green dots represented active civilizations, their signals constantly updating to show population centers, military installations, and communication networks. But in one section of the map, where the human territories should have been glowing with activity, there was nothing but empty black space. "They haven't missed a meeting," Velish said quietly. "They've disappeared entirely." The words seemed impossible. Civilizations didn't just vanish. There were always signs, always warnings. Wars left debris fields and refugee streams. Plagues left distress signals and medical emergencies. Natural disasters left geological evidence and calls for aid. But the human systems showed none of these indicators. High Chancellor Mordun, the ancient crystalline whose species had founded the Galactic Council 8,000 years ago, called the assembly to order. His voice resonated through the chamber like the ringing of a massive bell, commanding immediate attention from every delegation present. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Mordun began, his words carrying the weight of millennia. "We face an unprecedented situation. 48 hours ago, all communication with human space ceased, not gradually, not with warning, but instantaneously across all their territories." A ripple of concerned murmurs spread through the assembled delegates. The humans controlled nearly 200 star systems, with a combined population exceeding 50 billion individuals. They operated some of the most advanced research facilities in the galaxy and maintained one of the largest merchant fleets in known space. Captain Thexara of the insectoid hive worlds raised one of her 6 arms to speak. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as she addressed the assembly. "Perhaps their communication networks experienced a technical failure," she suggested, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "The humans are known for their experimental technologies. They might have simply overreached and caused a system-wide breakdown." But Commander Velish was already shaking her head. "We sent reconnaissance drones to 17 human systems. The planets are there, the stations are there, even their ships are there, floating in space exactly where they should be. But there are no life signs, no energy signatures, no signs of any biological activity whatsoever." The silence that followed was deafening. Delegate after delegate began to grasp the full scope of what had happened. 50 billion humans had somehow vanished without leaving behind any evidence of where they had gone or how they had disappeared. Dr. Kasani, the chief xenobiologist of the Council's scientific division, stood to address the assembly. Her tentacled form moved gracefully as she activated a detailed holographic display showing scan results from human territories. "The reconnaissance data reveals something even more disturbing," she announced, her telepathic communication reaching every mind in the chamber simultaneously. "The disappearance was not random. Every human, from newborn infants to elderly citizens, vanished at exactly the same moment. Our chronometric analysis indicates the event occurred at 14:47:33 Universal Standard Time, with no variation across their entire civilization. The implications were staggering. Such precision suggested either technology far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, or coordination on a scale that defied comprehension. Ambassador Korthan of the Mechanical Confederation processed this information through his quantum computational matrix before speaking. His metallic voice carried no emotion, but his words struck fear into organic hearts across the chamber. Statistical analysis indicates a 99.7% probability that this was not a natural phenomenon or accidental occurrence. The humans have either been removed by an external force, or they have removed themselves through means unknown to galactic science. High Chancellor Morden called for a brief recess, but the delegates remained in their seats, too shocked to move. The humans had been an integral part of galactic civilization for 2 centuries. They served on important committees, contributed to scientific research, and maintained trade relationships with dozens of species. More importantly, the humans had something that many other species lacked. They had never shown fear of the unknown. While other civilizations approached new territories with caution and careful planning, humans dove headfirst into exploration and discovery. They had been the first to establish contact with 3 different species that had since become valued members of the galactic community. Senator Quillara of the Avian Republic voiced what many were thinking. If something was powerful enough to make the humans disappear without warning, what does that mean for the rest of us? Are we safe? Should we be preparing our defenses? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The humans had possessed some of the most advanced defensive technologies in the galaxy. Their military, while not the largest, was known for its innovative tactics and adaptive strategies. If they had been overwhelmed or chosen to flee, what hope did other civilizations have? Commander Velish activated the tactical displays, showing the current defensive positions of all major galactic powers. The absence of human forces created obvious gaps in the galaxy's security network, particularly along the outer rim territories where human exploration fleets had been mapping new systems and establishing early warning stations. The immediate concern is the destabilization of our defensive perimeter, Velish explained, highlighting the vulnerable areas in red. Human forces were responsible for monitoring 12 critical jump points and maintaining early warning systems across 47 systems. Without their presence, we have significant blind spots in our ability to detect potential threats. But as the delegates studied the tactical situation, a more troubling realization began to emerge. The humans hadn't just disappeared. They had taken their technology with them. Every human ship, every human station, every piece of human equipment remained physically present, but their advanced systems had been completely purged of data. Dr. Kessiani presented her analysis of the abandoned human technology. Complete data wipe across all systems. Not destroyed, not corrupted, simply gone. It's as if someone reached into every computer, every data bank. 3 months had passed since the human disappearance, and the galaxy was beginning to fracture. What had started as concern and investigation had evolved into suspicion, paranoia, and barely contained panic among the remaining civilizations. Commander Velish stood in the center of the Council's newly established Crisis Command Center, watching dozens of holographic displays that showed the deteriorating situation across known space. Without human presence, several critical trade routes had become unstable. Pirates and raiders, who had previously avoided human-patrolled space, now operated freely in the abandoned territories. The investigation had consumed enormous resources and yielded frustratingly little information. Teams of specialists from every major civilization had combed through human space, analyzing everything from atmospheric compositions to quantum residue signatures. The conclusion was always the same. The humans had simply ceased to exist at a specific moment in time. Dr. Kesani approached the command center with the latest report from the scientific investigation teams. Her tentacled form moved with obvious exhaustion. The xenobiologist had been working virtually non-stop since the disappearance, trying to find some clue that might explain what had happened. "Commander, we've completed the analysis of the human research facility on Kepler Prime," she reported, her telepathic communication tinged with frustration. "Like all the others, we found their experiments intact but incomplete. They were in the middle of testing something called Project Exodus when the disappearance occurred." Velish turned her attention to the new data. Project Exodus had been mentioned in fragmentary records found across multiple human installations, but the details remained maddeningly unclear. The humans had been secretive about the project, limiting access to only their highest-level researchers and military personnel. "What kind of project was it?" Velish asked, though she suspected the answer would be as incomplete as all the others they had discovered. "Based on the equipment we found and the energy signatures we detected, it appears to have been related to large-scale matter transmission," Dr. Kesani explained, activating a holographic display of the abandoned laboratory. "But the scale is unprecedented. We're talking about technology that could theoretically relocate entire populations across vast distances." The implications were staggering. If the humans had developed technology that could transport their entire civilization to a new location, it would explain both the precision and completeness of their disappearance. But it also raised new questions that were perhaps even more disturbing than the original mystery. Ambassador Zethkar, who had become the liaison between the investigation teams and the Council, studied the data with growing unease. His 4 eyes tracked across the technical specifications, trying to understand the scope of what the humans had apparently achieved. "If they possessed this technology," Zethkar said slowly, "why did they use it? What prompted them to abandon territories they had occupied for 2 centuries? What were they running from?" This question had haunted the investigation from the beginning. The humans had shown no signs of distress before their disappearance. Their diplomatic communications had been normal, their trade relationships stable, their scientific research progressing as usual. There had been no indication of any crisis that might have prompted such a drastic action. Captain Thexara arrived at the command center with disturbing news from the Outer Rim territories. Her insectoid features were more agitated than usual, her mandibles clicking rapidly in a pattern that indicated extreme stress. "Commander, we've detected movement in the void sectors beyond human space," she reported. "Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures moving toward galactic civilization. Whatever's out there is big, and it's heading in our direction." Velish felt her crystalline skin grow cold. The void sectors were the unexplored regions beyond the galaxy's outer rim, areas so distant and hostile that even human exploration fleets had avoided them. If something was emerging from those regions, it suggested that the humans might not have disappeared voluntarily after all. "How large are these energy signatures?" Velish asked, dreading the answer. "Each signature is roughly equivalent to a dreadnought-class vessel," Thexara replied. "But our sensors are detecting at least 300 of them moving in perfect formation toward the systems that used to be under human protection." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. 300 dreadnought-sized vessels represented a fleet larger than anything in recorded galactic history. The combined military forces of all Council civilizations would struggle to match such numbers, especially without human support. Dr. Kesani was already analyzing the new data, her tentacles working frantically across multiple control interfaces. "The energy signatures don't match any known technology in our databases," she announced after several minutes of analysis. "Whatever these vessels are, they're using power sources and propulsion systems completely unknown to galactic science." Senator Quillera, who had arrived with an emergency authorization from the Avian Republic, spoke with barely controlled panic. "Are we looking at an invasion force? Did the humans discover this threat and flee rather than fight?" The possibility was terrifying, but it fit the available evidence. If the humans had detected an approaching threat too powerful to resist, their mysterious departure might have been a strategic retreat rather than abandonment. But this raised an even more troubling question. If the humans, with all their technology and determination, had chosen to flee, what chance did the remaining galactic civilizations have? Commander Velish activated the emergency protocols, sending alerts to every Council member civilization. Military forces across the galaxy began mobilizing, but their preparations felt inadequate against an unknown threat of such apparent magnitude. "How long until the unknown fleet reaches inhabited systems?" Velish asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Thexara consulted her navigation computers before responding. At their current speed, approximately 18 standard days until they reach the outermost human territories. If they continue on their present course, they'll encounter our defensive perimeter 6 days after that. 3 weeks to prepare for a threat that had apparently been powerful enough to drive humanity into hiding. The timeline was impossibly short, especially when they had no idea what they were preparing to face. High Chancellor Morden addressed the galaxy through emergency bro. The battle for the Andromache system had been raging for 6 hours, and the Galactic Defense Forces were losing badly. Commander Velish watched from the bridge of the Council flagship as another wave of Harbinger vessels tore through their defensive lines with devastating efficiency. The alien ships moved unlike anything in galactic military doctrine. They flowed through space like living creatures, their dark hulls seeming to absorb energy weapons fire while returning devastatingly precise attacks that crippled Council vessels with surgical precision. Each Harbinger ship fought with the coordination of a hive mind, anticipating and countering every tactical maneuver the Council forces attempted. 2 weeks had passed since the first contact with the Harbinger fleet. The opening battles had been disasters for the Galactic Alliance. Despite bringing together the combined military might of 47 civilizations, they had managed to destroy only a handful of enemy vessels while losing nearly 300 ships of their own. Captain Thexara's voice crackled through the communication system from her position, commanding the insectoid battle group. "Commander, we're reading massive energy buildups across the Harbinger fleet. I think they're preparing for something big." On the tactical display, the enemy formations began shifting into a pattern that the Council analysts had designated as harvest configuration. According to the fragmentary data they had managed to collect from destroyed Harbinger vessels, this arrangement preceded the deployment of weapons designed to strip the energy from entire star systems. Ambassador Zethkar, who had volunteered to serve as a tactical advisor despite his diplomatic background, studied the enemy movements with growing dread. "They're not just trying to destroy our fleets," he realized. "They're positioning to drain the system's star. If they succeed, every world in this system will freeze within days." The Harbingers had demonstrated this capability twice already, turning thriving solar systems into frozen wastelands devoid of all energy. The technology was beyond anything in galactic understanding, drawing power directly from stellar cores and somehow converting it into fuel for their continued advance. Dr. Kesaani, working from the flagship's science stations, had been analyzing Harbinger technology since the first engagement. Her tentacles moved frantically across control interfaces as she processed increasingly desperate data. "Their ships aren't machines in any sense we understand," she announced, her telepathic communication filled with scientific fascination and horror. "They're some form of engineered organisms, grown rather than built. That's why our weapons have limited effectiveness. We're not fighting technology. We're fighting evolved biology that's been designed for warfare." The revelation explained much about the Harbinger tactics. Their ships regenerated damage, adapted to repeated attacks, and coordinated with the unconscious perfection of a natural ecosystem. Fighting them was like trying to defeat an entire evolved species with conventional military doctrine. As the tactical situation continued to deteriorate, High Chancellor Mordun made the decision that everyone had been dreading. He authorized the use of the Council's most devastating weapons, planet-killer devices that could shatter worlds, but would also doom any civilian populations in their vicinity. But before the order could be transmitted, something impossible appeared on the long-range sensors. Ships were emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system, hundreds of them, moving in formations that were hauntingly familiar to anyone who had studied human military tactics. The new arrivals transmitted a simple message across all frequencies. Council forces, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We're here to finish what we started. All vessels maintain current positions and prepare to observe humanity's answer to the Harbinger threat. Velish felt her crystalline features flush with relief and disbelief. The humans had returned, bringing with them a fleet that dwarfed even the massive Harbinger armada. But these ships looked different from the vessels humanity had operated before their disappearance. They were sleeker, more advanced, and they moved with a predatory grace that suggested significant technological evolution. The human fleet didn't hesitate or negotiate. They drove straight into the Harbinger formation with tactics that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging long-range fire, the human vessels closed to point-blank range, their weapons systems engaging in direct energy exchanges that would have destroyed any known ship design. But the human vessels held together, their hulls glowing with energy fields that seemed to absorb and redirect Harbinger attacks. More surprisingly, the humans appeared to be communicating with the Harbinger organisms, sending complex data streams that caused immediate responses in enemy behavior. Admiral Chen's voice reached the Council flagship directly. Commander Velish, I apologize for our abrupt departure, but we needed time to prepare for this encounter. The Harbingers aren't invaders. They're a cleanup crew. Their species was designed millions of years ago to eliminate civilizations that develop technology beyond a certain threshold. The explanation came in fragments as the battle raged around them. Humanity had discovered the Harbinger threat decades before their disappearance, buried in ancient ruins on a dead world at the galaxy's edge. The aliens were part of a vast system designed by an extinct civilization to prevent any species from developing technology that could threaten the universe itself. We spent the last months in a pocket dimension, accelerating our technological development and learning to communicate with Harbinger biology. Admiral Chen continued, as her forces systematically dismantled the alien fleet with weapons that seemed to understand their enemies at a molecular level. We couldn't risk staying in normal space while we developed these capabilities. If the Harbingers had detected our research, they would have activated their final protocol, the sterilization of the entire galaxy. The human vessels fought with impossible precision, their weapons targeting specific biological systems within Harbinger ships. Instead of destroying the alien vessels outright, they were performing what appeared to be surgical modifications, altering the organism's biological imperatives. Dr. Kasani monitored the process with growing amazement. They're not killing the Harbingers, she announced. They're reprogramming them, changing their biological mission parameters at the genetic level. Within hours, the battle transformed from a desperate last stand into a controlled modification procedure. The Harbingers stopped attacking and began transmitting complex biological data to the human fleet. Their harvest configuration dissolved, and the threat to the system's star disappeared. Admiral Chen's final transmission to the Council came as the last Harbinger vessel completed its biological modification. The threat has been neutralized, but the galaxy needs to understand what nearly happened here. The Harbingers were created to prevent civilizations from developing technology that could damage the fundamental structure of reality itself. We've modified their programming to recognize cooperative advancement rather than individual technological achievement. The humans had returned, not as refugees or conquerors, but as guardians who had sacrificed their place in normal space to protect the galaxy from a threat none of the other civilizations could have imagined. Their disappearance had been the ultimate act of protection, removing themselves from the equation until they could return with a solution. As the human fleet prepared to depart for the final phase of their mission, hunting down other Harbinger fleets across the universe, Admiral Chen left the Council with a final message. "We'll be back permanently once we've dealt with all the Harbinger groups. The galaxy is safer than it was, but it's also more connected to forces beyond our local region. We'll need to work together to ensure that future technological development serves life rather than threatening it." The humans vanished once again, but this time their departure carried hope rather than mystery. They had proven that sometimes the greatest act of courage is knowing when to step away, and the greatest act of love is sacrificing everything to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Adcast, informing all civilizations of the approaching crisis. His ancient voice carried across thousands of worlds, calling for unity in the face of an unknown threat. But privately, even he wondered if the Council had the strength to survive what was coming. As the investigation teams continued their work, they made one final discovery that changed everything. Deep in the core systems of a human research station, Dr. Kesani found a partially corrupted message that had been transmitted just moments before the human disappearance. The message was brief and cryptic, but its contents sent chills through every being who heard it. Protocol 7 activated. Population transfer complete. If you're receiving this message, the Harbingers have found us again. Prepare for the long war. We'll return when the galaxy is ready. Remember us not as cowards, but as guardians who chose exile over extinction. The truth was finally beginning to emerge. The humans hadn't fled in panic or abandoned their allies out of selfishness. They had made a calculated sacrifice, removing themselves and their advanced technology from the galaxy to prevent something called the Harbingers from using human knowledge against the other civilizations. But this revelation came with a terrible realization. The approaching fleet was exactly what the humans had tried to protect everyone from, and now the galaxy would have to face the Harbingers without humanity's help, every research facility simultaneously, and removed only the information while leaving the hardware intact. The sophistication required for such an operation was beyond anything in the galactic database. It suggested a level of technological advancement that made even the most advanced Council civilizations look primitive by comparison. As the session continued, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Human trading posts had gone silent. Human research stations no longer responded to communications. Human merchant vessels floated empty in space, their cargo holds still full, but their crews nowhere to be found. The pattern was consistent and absolute. In the span of a single moment, humanity had vanished from the galaxy as completely as if they had never existed at all.